When I was about 20 years old, I moved to a place that was very different from what I was used to. See, I grew up in a neighborhood in South Minneapolis where everybody knew everyone. Everyone, all the kids played together. To this day, I could go back to that block, I could tell you the names of every family that lived in every house. And that was normal to me. That's what I was used to. And it felt right. You had a sense of community, and it felt safer, especially as a kid, I mean, you might get beat up, but you knew who was beating you up. Then when I was 20, I moved into a neighborhood where everyone just kind of kept to themselves. And this was a triplex. My father was a landlord at the time, so he bought a triplex in this neighborhood. And it was more like an upstairs, downstairs standard duplex. And in the downstairs main unit, my brother and his wife lived there. And in the upstairs unit, we rented out. And I was relegated to the luxurious confines of the attached garage, which had been converted into a studio apartment that did have a heat source and it had a bathroom. I guess it was legal. And we lived there, and when I say everyone kept to themselves, I mean, by the way, if you look up the phrase on a Google News search, he kept to himself, you don't find anything good. And we had our neighbors next door to the south that were very neighborly, very friendly. The guy had handyman skills, and he would help us with plumbing and such. And I'm still Facebook friends with Dean even today. But other than that, we didn't know anybody. I mean, I could see the yard sale guy across the street. He had a yard sale every weekend. The apartment building across the street, there were a lot of people coming and going, and I could speculate, but to be fair, there were people coming and going to my place too, and I was tutoring math. So I don't know what was going on. But this is my view of the neighborhood after living there for 2 years. I knew the neighbors next door, and that was it. Then came the first Tuesday in August as a national night out, and someone organized a block party on our block. And I don't know if they had done it before and I missed it or hadn't been. Anyway, this was my first time going. I said, this will be great. I'll get to know some neighbors. And I didn't know what to expect. And the night came, and everybody was there. It was incredible. It was like they were filming a movie. And if you had a Hollywood script that requested for a generic vibrant street party scene, this is what we had. I mean, there were kids running around, neighbors were talking, the grills were going, and I felt like I was walking around in a movie because I didn't know anybody, And I met some neighbors, and one of the neighbors I met, her name was Diane, and I think she felt a little bit like I did. She wanted to get to know her neighbors, and she seemed just as excited to meet me as I was to meet her. She said, "You've been there 2 years?" Yeah, she'd been there more than 2 years, and she even said, "Stop by anytime. My house is right there. Come on by." And this being Minnesota, of course, I never did. But, I mean, wouldn't it feel awkward? I met you at the picnic, you sort of... So, the next day, back to the way it was. You had the yard sale guy and the traffic at the end, and the kids were gone. And, the kids came from everywhere because there were free hot dogs, and I don't know how many actually lived on our block. But, and time went on, and the neighborhood was back to the way it was. And I thought, well, I didn't expect the neighborhood to transform overnight, but, I got to meet some neighbors. About 3 months later, it was Wednesday night, the night before Thanksgiving. And I was coming home from wherever I'd been at about 10 o'clock. And I parked my car, and there's Diane walking down the alleyway, and she says, "Hey, you want to have a beer and celebrate the holidays with me?" And she's got like a 6-pack of beer in her hand. I thought, well, let's see, I'm in graduate school, I got a 4-day weekend coming. Yeah. And, so I could get to know her a little bit better, and I could show off my apartment. So she came in, and I started to realize a few things. And the first thing I realized was that, back in August, I felt like I had this sort of kindred spirit that we kind of connected, and we both wanted to meet neighbors and all that. But 3.5 months later, it seemed like that might have been really just about the only thing we had in common. And it was just kind of a little awkward. The second thing I realized is, believe it or not, as a 22-year-old male, I really just wanted to talk and have beer, and I wasn't interested in anything other than that. And I was starting to get the vibe that from her end, that wasn't true. And for me to get that vibe, it has to be pretty blatant, because I'm not very perceptive when it comes to, well, anything, but especially this sort of thing. You know, I had a classmate in graduate school that told me she wanted to come to my house so I could teach her how to play chess. And I didn't even figure that out. And that's just a story I know about. And then the third thing I realized was, you know, I turned on the heat when I got home, so it got warmer, and she took her call. It was, this wasn't Diane. Now, I told you I'm not very perceptive, and it didn't occur to me, like, what are you doing in the alley with a six-pack? But anyway, and then pretty soon she came in, she was sitting on my lap, and she says, I just want to feed my kids. And I thought, okay, look, I'm sorry. I thought you were someone else. You have to go. I gave her a couple bucks. I said, this is for the beer, you know. And she left. And anyway, I don't know. I think what I learned from all this, you know, so for the rest of the time that I lived in that neighborhood, which was about 4 more years, I pretty much just kept to myself.